Ubisoft invited me to an early access gameplay session of Star Wars Outlaws, where I had the chance to play the game for nearly 4 hours across 2 different locations. During this gameplay preview, I delved into several main story missions, tackled some side content, and explored what the game has to offer. While I only experienced a small portion of the game, I'm excited to share my thoughts on the gameplay, highlighting what I liked, what could be improved, and whether I think Star Wars Outlaws will be worth picking up when it releases on August 30th. This is not a sponsored video, just an opportunity to capture some early gameplay and share my impressions. So, let's get started. I want to start by giving you an overview of what I saw and the missions I was able to play, providing some thoughts along the way, then I'll discuss some more of the specific thoughts on the different aspects of the game, from the characters to the mission design to the game's combat. My gameplay experience with Star Wars Outlaws began on the moon of Toshara. If you've been following Outlaws thus far, you'll know that the moon of Toshara is a brand new moon in the Star Wars universe created by Massive specifically for the game. It appeared to be an earlier section of the game where we crash landed on Toshara in Kay's ship, the Trailblazer, and immediately were met with bandit gunfire. Now this shootout featured a really fun element that I got to use right off the bat, and that was Kay's adrenaline ability. It allows you to slow down time and use a Red Dead Redemption style ability where you can target multiple enemies at once and then fire on them rapidly. And it was quite a fun way to jump into the action. I really liked that ability. We then jumped on our speeder to escape the bandits, blasting them to bits when we got the chance. After escaping the bandits, I found myself in Miragana, the main city of Toshara. When entering the city, I had to stop and get checked at an Imperial checkpoint, which I thought was a really nice immersive touch, and then I made my way to the cantina. Now cantinas in the game serve as these sort of hub areas where you can find information and missions. As I was maneuvering through the city of Miragana, I noticed that there seemed like there was a lot to do and look at, and at least there felt like there was a lot to do. I stopped by a betting station where I was able to bet on a Fathier race and I actually won myself some credits. However, the first big mission of the game came when I was trying to find a way into the suite of Pyke's Syndicate leader Gorak. Now, one of the nice things about the game, or at least this specific mission that I noticed pretty quickly, was that you can actually approach things from multiple ways. As I entered the cantina, there was a guy who offered to sell me a VIP pass to Gorak's private suite. However, since I did not have those credits, I had to find another way in. I also found a technician who was working on what I believe was an elevator that could have possibly taken me up to that place, and I had the opportunity to try and bribe her or find another way in, and since I didn't have the credits again, I had to find another way to sneak in. But this is one of the first things I noticed, was that you have multiple ways that you can approach certain missions in certain areas, and so that's something I really liked. Eventually what I had to do was use my data spike, which is basically the lockpick of Outlaws, to enter a vent and then sneak in that way. During the beginning of this mission is where you are introduced to the game's reputation system and the underworld in general. Now the reputation system, if you're not familiar, is basically a like or dislike system with the different syndicates or factions in the game. This includes groups like the Pykes, the Hutts, or even the Ashiga clan, which you'll see later on in this video. Now eventually my mission led me to infiltrating a Pyke base, and since I did not have a good reputation with the Pykes, I had to sneak into the base to steal the information that I needed. Now this is one of the key elements of Star Wars Outlaws, which is this reputation system. The better the reputation you have, the more opportunities you might have with a certain syndicate. And in this case, since I was brand new to the underworld, I had no real reputation at all, and so I had to find another way to get in and get that information. Now following this mission, I got the opportunity to upgrade the blaster with an ion casing, allowing me to use the ion module for the gun. Now what's pretty cool about the ion module is that you have to use that for certain things like taking out cameras or trying to take down droids, or I believe shielded enemies as well. Now fast forward in the gameplay footage, when I had a better reputation with the Pykes, I had to complete another mission where I needed to access a Pyke base. Now at this point I actually had a better reputation with the Pykes, so I could actually just walk right into the Pyke base to try and get what I needed, putting that reputation system to work. And this is what I found really cool about the reputation system, being able to access places that you otherwise wouldn't be able to get to. While I couldn't get all the way to my objective without doing some more stealth actions, I was able to get a whole lot closer than I would have if I didn't have a good reputation with the Syndicate. Even within Syndicate areas that you can access, there are still restricted areas that you can't go into. Now, I'm not sure if this will change as you continue to increase your reputation with that group. If you get all the way to the max level of likability, maybe then you can go into those more restricted areas, but based on my gameplay, I wasn't able to see that thus far. The next step of my journey took me to Jaunta's Hope, which is a smaller town on Toshara where Kay's ship was being worked on. I visited another small cantina and learned that I could upgrade my speeder. Now, while exploring the world, there were some opportunities for some puzzle solving. There was one that had like an underground door that I tried to open that I wasn't really exactly sure how to do, but then there was another area where I had to use the ion module to power up and open a door. So just some small examples of puzzle solving. Pretty simple stuff for that one, but just an example of what you might see in game. During this time, I also stopped to do a little speeder racing where I did win even though I hadn't yet upgraded my speeder. I did go ahead later on and upgrade that speeder when I met an expert named CeeLo. CeeLo is one of the people that Star Wars Outlaws calls an expert. Instead of having that traditional XP system and way of leveling up, you may have heard that Star Wars Outlaws has a system of experts that help you gain different abilities for Kay, her speeder, her blaster, ship, etc. But we'll discuss experts a little bit later on as well. While the speeder race was fun, it wasn't incredibly exciting. I'm hoping that this was just to try and introduce you to the concept, and hopefully they'll get more exciting with later races, such as maybe racing with multiple opponents or having more obstacles you have to maneuver or more jumps or more exciting things like that. But for the first one, it was interesting, but nothing really too exciting. When working with CeeLo, I had to find an atmospheric accelerator and a wind harvester. This is a place where I got to see the game's parkour in action, climbing, jumping, swinging with a grapple hook, etc. The parkour in the game was very reminiscent of Star Wars Jedi Survivor with different textures that give you an indication that objects are climbable. It was a pretty simple parkour system that worked. It's no Dying Light or AC Unity, but the parkour system is fine. It's just very basic and it's fine. Next up, I got to jump into space with Kay's ship, the Trailblazer. I collected some cargo and then had to defend myself from some raiders. Now, this was my first opportunity to get my hands on some space combat, which I thought was pretty fun. Space combat in Star Wars Outlaws is not going to be anything that's going to blow your mind. It's simple, but I feel like it probably does just enough to make it interesting. Once you get the hang of the combat and the controls, then you can take out enemies pretty quickly. The ship has a few different blaster settings from basic blast to a homing missile that you can lock onto enemies with. You can also repair your ship as well, and then when you're done fighting, you can jump into hyperspace to new planets and orbits. Now, after defending myself against the raiders, I was able to venture onto an Imperial fuel station, which was my first serious brush with the Empire. And here I was tasked with finding and accessing a data vault. Now, one thing I will say is that they got the sense of scale down pretty well in Star Wars Outlaws. From a distance, the fuel station doesn't look that big, but once you get next to it and you see the TIE fighters flying next to it as well, you really get a sense of how big this place is. And then when you actually fly into it, you can just see how massive it is. And I'm sure it'll be even more impressive if we get to see something like a Star Destroyer as well. So the scale of the game is really done quite well, and I did like that. And overall, the scale and scope of the game does feel pretty good, getting from one location to another. So thinking back on Toshara, you could get from Miragana to Jaunta's Hope pretty quickly, and it didn't feel like you were going forever and ever, and it felt like the distances between places were pretty good. Now, the Imperial mission did involve plenty of stealth as well as a shootout at the end, and I would say that the game does have some decent, challenging stealth and platforming mechanics. Some of the times when I might have failed were probably my own doing, just because I was playing on keyboard and mouse, and most of the time I do play on controller, but I did find the stealth mechanics in the game challenging at times, but they were pretty predictable, so you could understand where you messed up, what you could have fixed, and where you need to do it differently the next time. And the enemies didn't feel like just mindless idiots that could be cheesed super hard, at least in the time that I played. They responded pretty accurately to what you did, and they would notice you pretty quickly if you weren't careful. Now, the importance of Nyx was definitely on display during this mission, and he's critical for successful stealth, Nyx being Kay's companion. He can sabotage alarm systems, attack enemies so you can take out others, and even distract enemies so you can avoid detection. He can sneak around barriers and turn them off, allowing access to different restricted areas. So he is definitely a key when it comes to stealth and different aspects of the gameplay. After trying and failing just a few times, I did reach the data vault, and that's where I met a new character. After helping to free him, I had a big shootout with the Empire to escape the fuel station, which I thought was a lot of fun. This is when I got the opportunity to use some of the weapons that you can pick up off the ground. If you don't know already, Kay has her blaster, but she can pick up weapons that she sees along the map that other enemies have dropped. However, you can't keep these weapons forever, as you have to drop them when you interact with other objects. After escaping the fuel station and fighting off some TIE fighters, we cleared out our wanted level and then returned return to Miragana to finish the mission. After finishing that mission, I got to jump through hyperspace into Kijimi, which I have to say was an awesome looking location, probably my favorite. And Kijimi space and Kijimi orbit are just incredible to look at. Now, I didn't get to spend a lot of time in Kijimi as I did run out of time for my gameplay session, but I got to complete one mission and have a quick look around the city, and I have to say that it was probably, like I said, my favorite location that I've gotten to see in Star Wars Outlaws. For some reason, it just really reminded me of one of those snowy cities in Skyrim. It just has this dark undertone and it felt really interesting. And Kijimi is just the one place I just cannot wait to return to and just get to explore every area of that city. That's just how much I enjoyed the look and the feel of it. Now, the final mission that I played was sneaking into an Ashiga-controlled area, the Ashiga clan being another clan in the game, to try and help find a safecracker named Ankh. After sneaking in and accessing some data to help locate them, my gameplay experience ended. So that was an overview of what I got to experience, but let's discuss some more specific aspects about Star Wars Outlaws, from Kay's character to the world to the game's combat and performance. Starting with Kay, I actually really liked her character in the game. In Outlaws, the character writing and voice acting are pretty enjoyable, avoiding the millennial writing or whatever you want to call it that has plagued some recent games like Forspoken. Kay is quick-witted and cracks jokes without overdoing it. The dialogue, including the interactions with the other characters, are fun, maintaining sort of the quirky charm of Star Wars, and overall, I enjoyed engaging with the characters and the story of the game. One of the big things that Star Wars Outlaws does well is the atmospheres and the city areas are excellent, with major cities like Miragana and Kijimi offering dense and active environments that do feel very immersive. While the game does feel bustling and vibrant within the large cityscapes, the in-between areas can sometimes be shaky. The game's living world system is supposed to ensure that cities and towns feel alive with different movement, traffic, Imperial patrols, and different interactions with the NPCs, which I think it does a good job of doing. But one issue that I saw that could be improved before the final release is the lack of immersive NPC behavior outside of the cities and towns. So for example, during my playtime, I observed that NPCs on the speeders often kind of behave like drones. They will just be going in a set pattern and they can collide with you without even attempting to turn or slow down, and they really don't have any reaction whatsoever. However, within those larger cities and towns, the NPCs do feel a lot more vibrant, realistic, and it's primarily the areas between the locations that I think probably need some work. Another aspect of the world that I really enjoy is the ability to listen in on conversations and find different data pads with key information, which adds a lot of depth and realism to the gameplay. These features can lead you to experts, or they can provide you with valuable intel. For example, while I was on a mission in Miragana, I found a data pad with insider information on a Fathier race, which basically meant it was a fixed race, and I found this information, so it means I could have went and bet on that Fathier and then had a guaranteed win, giving me a bunch of credits. So I feel like these kind of small touches can really enhance the experience of just exploring that open world and making it worth your time. Now, the gameplay and combat in Star Wars Outlaws does have some really fun moments, but it's not perfect. Like I said earlier, I love the Red Dead style targeting system with the ability to slow down time and then eliminate multiple enemies at once. It's always going to be cool. And one of the really cool things I figured out is that you can do a quick 180 turn on your speeder, slow down time, and then shoot the enemies off their bikes, which I thought was just such a cool cinematic moment that you can do, and it was awesome. It's also a lot of fun to just blast stormtroopers and Imperial officers with Kay's blaster, and it just feels like something right out of the films. Despite these highlights, one of the biggest criticisms I have for Outlaws was the game's combat or gunplay. Now, combat and gunplay in the game did feel stiff. It's kind of difficult for me to articulate a specific reason, but the combat in Outlaws does feel a little bit stiff or heavy. Now, I play plenty of games, plenty of those being shooters, and maybe it's just the way that Kay moves as you're in combat or the more fixed angle of the camera when you're moving the reticle, but it just feels stiff, and honestly, that's the best way I can describe it. However, that doesn't mean I don't enjoy the combat, as it's still a lot of fun to do in game. I like the way that Kay maneuvers around the map, rolling, sliding, and leaning into cover when she gets close. I also like the way that the blaster and other weapons feel and sound in game, but there is a lack of fluidity to the game's combat. Additionally, like I mentioned earlier, the game's parkour system is quite basic and can sometimes feel slow and clunky. Giving its frequent use, if it was a little bit more advanced or a little bit more smooth, I think it would help enhance the gameplay, but that's just my opinion, of course. While these things didn't really take away from my overall enjoyment, they did present some drawbacks of the game, but I think overall it's still a good experience. Now, one of the best aspects of Star Wars Outlaws, I kind of mentioned earlier, is Kay's companion Nix. Nix is integral to the gameplay and has these different various abilities that really impact how you interact with the world. For example, he can ping the surrounding area to outline the enemies and the interactables, distract enemies while you're stealthing around, and even attack them to try and perform finishing moves on them by getting up close. And Nix is essential for basically every element of stealth gameplay. He can disable alarms, he can steal items from enemies, he can even fetch weapons from you, which is really cool. And that just, I don't know, he can do a lot of things that is a lot of fun. And he's truly the second character in this game. Now, as I mentioned a bit earlier, another thing that I do like about Outlaws is its unique approach to character leveling. So instead of the traditional grind seen in other Ubisoft titles like Assassin's Creed, the game ties progression to those specific missions and objectives that you find with the experts. For example, one of those, it would be like performing stealth takedowns to try and earn an ability called Fast Talk, which allows Kay to like buy time if she's spotted by enemies. We'll have to wait and see whether or not this system's actually going to be successful as we play through the game, but I think it's a breath of fresh air compared to some of the traditional like level up systems that we've seen. I'm definitely open to giving it a shot, and I hope that it works and it's a lot of fun. Now, one final note on just gameplay is that some of the missions I experienced did feel somewhat repetitive, especially those that involve like sneaking into a location to steal data or hack into a computer. There's a potential for these missions to become monotonous over time if they are repeated too often. However, I'll give the benefit of the doubt since I only experienced a small portion and can't definitely say this will be representative of the entire game. I haven't played enough to form a complete opinion yet, and hopefully there will be a wide variety of mission types that we will get to experience. Over the next few weeks, performance is going to be a big topic of discussion for Outlaws. As recently you may have seen, IGN released some gameplay footage that was, to say it best, was not very good, with some subpar particle effects and those animations. However, based on my experience, it was definitely different from what was seen in that IGN gameplay. While my preview was on a PC and IGN's footage was possibly on an Xbox build, not sure about that 100%. There was a notable difference in quality. During my gameplay experience, the particle effects and explosions were decent. They were definitely better than what IGN displayed. Based on the footage, you can actually see what my performance was like based on the gameplay you're seeing. My gameplay experience was also pretty smooth. It didn't have a lot of frame drops or hitching or anything like that, and the visuals actually look really nice. So it will be interesting to see how reviews compare between PC, Xbox, and PlayStation versions of the game. Now, during my gameplay preview, I did notice a few bugs, but they didn't take away from my gameplay experience. They were just small things, such as my camera would maybe get stuck at times and I would just have to go to the start menu and leave. One time I crashed my speeder and I was just floating in midair. It was just typical bugs of like an early build, so nothing that I don't think can be resolved before the final release. Overall, they weren't significant things, but I just wanted to point them out because I wanted to be honest and, share what I experienced. So guys, based on my gameplay experience with Star Wars Outlaws, this is a game that I am definitely looking forward to playing. In my opinion, it has some really good characters, very impressive visuals, and immersive cities that genuinely feel like they could be a part of the Star Wars universe. And of course, some of those are real places that do feel like they've been brought to life in this game. Despite some areas that are rough around the edges, the game was definitely fun, which is what matters the most. While it's always wise to wait for reviews before purchasing a game, I think Outlaws has a lot of potential. I'm not a big proponent of pre-ordering games. It's always safer to wait for the reviews, see what people are saying, and then decide if it's worth buying. I'm currently working on a massive preview for Star Wars Outlaws that I hope will be releasing soon, so if you want to know more about the game, be sure and subscribe to the channel. Be sure and let me know your thoughts on the gameplay you saw, and I will see you next time.